Herzlich willkommen auf dem YouTube-Kanal vom ZDF Magazin Royale. Und wie gerade im ZDF Magazin Royale in der Fernsehsendung angekündigt, unterhalten wir uns jetzt endlich mal ausführlich, ohne diese verdammte zeitliche Begrenzung von Fernsehen, zum Thema Sand, dem weirdesten Thema bislang in der kurzen Geschichte vom ZDF Magazin Royale, mit Kiran Pereira, live Corona-safe, zugeschaltet from London, Autorin und Expertin zum Thema Sand. Hey Kiran, thanks for joining the ZDF Magazin YouTube channel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, so let's go, because it's such a weird topic, let's start from the beginning. If the worldwide sand crisis is such a huge problem, why does anyone hardly know about it?
Because sand is hidden from view. It's extracted in remote supply chains. We have extended supply chains. But when it is transformed into concrete and glass and pigments for paints and plastics and paper, you don't really see sand. So it's actually hidden from view.
But how come? How did you get in touch with the whole topic?
So I grew up in Bangalore in South India, and as I was growing up, it was a sleepy little garden town that got transformed into a Silicon Valley of India. And this transformation was largely fueled by concrete. As I grew up, I constantly read reports about rivers being decimated because of sand mining. And at the same time, I saw hundreds of trucks filled with sand flying up and down the roads. And all the sand was coming from precious places like rivers, which were being, destroyed. So sustainability is often defined as the ability to meet your needs today without destroying the ability of future generations to meet their needs. But if we are building at such a rate and extracting and growing in a manner that destroys our environment, is it really sustainable? So that's the question I asked myself and decided to study further. I came to London.
Why is sand such an important resource? Is it because it seems to be free, or why do people like mine sand?
It's a really, really important resource in especially in the modern world. Concrete contains about 60 to 75% sand and gravel by volume. Glass, for example, is made up of about 70% silica sand. So we use sand in methods like fracking. Every fracking well uses about 50 to 70 rail cars of sand. And recent advances in technology mean that they're using 100 to 250 rail cars of sand. 100 rail cars of sand is about a mile-long train of sand of a non-renewable resource to frack just one well.
Why don't we recycle sand? Why is there a need to mine more and more sand? Why don't we take sand as we take some kind of paper and recycle it and remodel it into new concrete or recycled glass?
We are doing it, but not nearly enough. We really need to increase our rates of extraction. It's an uneven playing field. Any recycling involves cost, whereas the cost of sand that is free, nature has done all the work for you, and you pay very negligible charges for transport and extraction. That's not an even playing field. So that could be one of the reasons why we are not seeing as much recycling as we should be seeing.
And is the sand extraction rather a problem for developing countries, or is it more like a global problem?
This is definitely a global problem. You find places in Belgium, for example, scientists have found out that...
Which is a weird country, you have to admit, Belgium. It is kind of weird.
They've done some phenomenal work, and they've found out that the coarse fraction of sand in the Belgian coastal shelf will last only for 80 years if you consider competing uses like wind farms or habitat for fisheries and things like that. So because of these growing and competing uses, often the amount of sand that we have available to us is limited.
We thought that the whole the illegal sand mining is a thing happening in developing countries. And everybody was saying, oh, all right, in Germany, at least, we have enough sand. It's relatively safe to extract sand from our environment. There's nothing to be worried about. Would you say that's true, or?
So what you need to consider is that the extraction of natural resources used for buildings in the 20th century saw a 23-fold increase. So we've increased the amount of materials that we are extracting in order to build our buildings and our transport infrastructure by 23-fold. As the UNEP report explains, if you have a bank account and if you think in terms of a bank account and you increase your expenditure that way, it's not going to last very long, is it?
So let's turn to illegal sand mining. What countries are mostly affected by illegal sand mining or sand trading?
In several different countries: India, China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Ghana, Uganda, Kenya. I mean, there are so many countries across the world. It's really a growing list.
And what exactly is the sand mafia? Who is the sand mafia?
The sand mafia is not one organization. These are groups of very well connected, politically connected people. They are quite ruthless and violent. They threaten people, they intimidate, they steal sand basically by a wide variety of means. And they can even kill people if they get in the way.
Is there like a sand godfather, like one guy who's the supervillain who's responsible for most of the illegal sand mining, or isn't there such a thing?
So because it's not one organization, they're very territorial. It can depend on the geography. Yes, there are godfathers, and depending on many, and there are sand barons, people who control all these trades.
Yeah, could you explain how they are operating, how they take the sand, and what exactly is illegal about their behavior?
I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. For example, in China, in the year 2000, they banned sand mining in the Yangtze River. But sand is an essential ingredient, right? It's necessary for concrete. So illegal extraction continued to happen. They found in the year 2019, so you found all these sand mining, these ships that extract sand illegally. By day, they look very harmless, but by night, they put down a pipe and suck up a whole, thousands of tons of sand. Each boatload of sand can cost can fetch them about 85,000 pounds or dollars. So it's very, very valuable. In 2019, they arrested over 305 sand mining vessels along the coast of China.
And they operate by night so that nobody's able to see anything.
Yes, right. And they change their tactics. Sometimes it can start with sand, but then they kind of morph into other criminal networks, so drug dealing or arms and narcotics, and it can expand.
There have been some countries which installed restrictions on the sand mining business. But why is there still mining happening?
So I think the demand is really, really fierce. Not many people know that there are different kinds of sand. And in countries like India, for example, sand and gravel are classified as minor minerals. So that it's not very high on the agenda.
Okay.
In Europe, for example, a lot of people go to Morocco, and for the beaches, but people are extracting sand from the beaches in order to build facilities for the tourists. Or people may go to Canary Islands for a holiday, but they may not know that sand that's being used to replenish beaches or build luxury resorts or golf courses is actually being imported is conflict sand. It's being imported from occupied territory of Western Sahara without the consent of the Sahrawi people.
So you say when I lay by the pool on Gran Canaria or Teneriffa, that the whole hotel behind me is built from sand that was extracted or, so to say, stolen from conflict regions of Western Africa?
Unfortunately, yes, it could be. There are cases that were in the spotlight into 2017, for example, a lot of protests happening because such sand was being indiscriminately extracted and exported from the Western Sahara region.
We had a lot of trouble finding current information on sand mining, on sand extraction. Why is there such few data on the whole thing?
I think that's one of the biggest challenges, lack of scientific data. Sand somehow seems to have fallen in our blind spot, but this is an emerging issue with major social, economic, environmental consequences, implications. So you will find more and more data going forward.
Let's talk about solutions, how we could get out of the whole weird sand thing which is going on currently. Aren't you getting really depressed, constantly thinking and talking about the sand crisis, and nobody really has the whole topic on its agenda?
To be honest, after I completed my master's degree, I definitely was depressed at the state of affairs. But as I continued my research, a prominent Buddhist monk in Sri Lanka told me that this work is like turning on a light switch and you find that your house is in a mess. You have a choice at that point. Are you going to leave the mess and ignore it, leave it for the next person, or are you going to do something about it? So for me, it's about stepping up to do something about it. And I'm inspired by the people that are working on solutions across the world. There are so many.
So although you know a lot about the whole sand extraction thing, you are still hopeful?
Yes.
Why? But why?
Hopeful, and this is something I would underscore.
Yeah. What could be the hope, our hope?
Because I think humans are incredibly creative. We have achieved a lot. Things that were only in science fiction a few years ago are today a reality. Do you have like an example? What could be like a solution for the international sand crisis? Yes, of course. For example, let me give you examples of, there are individual practices doing really, really exciting things. Like there's a practice here in the UK that's built a low-carbon pavilion for a famous opera house using materials like champagne corks or oyster shells, and you can get really creative with regenerative material using waste streams, mycelium insulation, things like that. There are many alternatives. So you can use raw earth, you can use Roundup, you can use straw bale construction, you can use timber. So German Ministry of Environment, for example, has chosen timber construction for their office in Berlin.
What can I do as a consumer to prevent the whole sand thing from happening?
That's a very good question. So yes, these are...
use more plastic bottles instead of glass bottles, for example, or don't use glasses?
And what you do with them after is the most important thing. So if you have phones and you're in the habit of changing phones, know that, the glass in the phone or the rare earths that go into are extracted from monazite sand. So I think the most important thing is you cannot solve a problem that you don't know you have. So learning as much as you can about it first is the first step, and talk about it with friends and family. You can watch Sand Wars, for example. If you go to my website, you can sign up for a free chapter. You also have a discussion guide that you can use to chat with friends and family or your colleagues. So educating ourselves is very important.
Maybe rewatch the current episode of ZDF Magazin Royale, in which we talk about sand for 20 minutes. Thank you very much for joining us today. Kiran Pereira from London, expert, author, social entrepreneur, and talking about sand all day long, which is quite interesting. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Und die Sendung könnt ihr natürlich nachschauen in der ZDF-Mediathek und weiterlesen zum Thema Sand. Mach ich jetzt auch. Ich lese jetzt auch zum Thema Sand. Bis nächste Woche.